Please allow me to introduce beautiful Eagle Woman.
Thanks. All right. Hope everyone's doing well today. I flew in late last night, so sorry I'm a bit tuckered out here this morning, or this afternoon even. Wow. So here we go. I guess just to introduce myself, my name is Brigette Lacquette. I'm from Mallard, Manitoba, and Cody First Nation. I recognize from both just because, both places kind of, helped shape me to who I am today, and they both helped me get to where I am today. Without, both of those community support, I honestly don't think I'd be, standing here in front of you guys, talking about my Olympic experience and my national team experience. So, honestly, I feel truly blessed to be able to share my story. I guess just for starters, growing up in Mallard meant, I had to face a few obstacles to get to where I am today. And, Mallard's I'd say about 4 hours north of Winnipeg. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. I kind of describe it as the middle of nowhere just because, it kind of is. There's less than 100 people there. One gravel road to get in, one gravel road to get out. No cell service, even to this day, still no cell service. We just got Wi-Fi about 8 years ago, so that's pretty cool. So, things looking up there. But yeah, there's really not a lot going on in Mallard. And, just, I guess for starters, growing up there in such a small community, I've had to overcome a couple obstacles, like I mentioned before. And the first one was, I was bullied when I was younger. I grew up with eczema. I grew up with really, really bad eczema. And, there was times where, people would just tease me for, because I'd be covered from like head to toe. And, I'd have struggle going to school. And, not a lot of people wanted to be my friend. And, even on top of that, as well as, I was a tomboy growing up, so I loved sports, and I could play any sport and just be the most content person in the world. And, just being, I guess just not really fitting into any group, was pretty tough for me. And, there was times where I wanted to give up and not want to go back to school. There was one significant time where I was getting bullied on the bus pretty bad after school. And the way it was in Mallard is that we'd pull up to one bus stop, and I lived next door to my aunts and my uncles and all my cousins. We basically all got off at one bus stop. So it'd be like my aunt and uncle lived here, we lived next door, my cuckoo and my chum lived next door to us, and then my other uncle and aunt lived next door, so we all kind of lived in a row. And we got off the bus, and I couldn't get off the bus fast enough because people were calling me all these names. And I was in tears, and I went running straight to my cuckoo and my chum's house. And, my cuckoo she'd always try to console me and make me feel better. And she'd always tell me, she's like, my girl, you don't need any other friends. I'll be your only friend in the whole wide world, which is super nice. But no one else wanted to be my friend that was my age. So, it was kind of, she'd always do that. And then my chum prayed for me. And, he put me on his lap, and, he told me not to give up. I told him, everyone's calling me all these names, and it's like, I want to quit school. I just want to quit. And, he put me on his lap, and, he prayed for me, and, he told me, he's like, you know what, my girl, don't give up. You're going to be put in a place where, God's going to put you in a place where everyone's going to notice you, and, he's like, just don't give up, keep going. And, from that day, that's kind of when I found my out through sport. And, basically, from that moment on, I kind of just started focusing on sport and school and basically focusing on myself. And I kind of found my love for hockey through that. And, I always played softball in the summer and hockey in the winter. But there was just something about hockey that I just loved. And, I could spend hours on the outdoor rink, stick handling and shooting and doing tight turns and just kind of working on different types of skills. And I'd always just picture myself being, in a big game and, scoring that winning goal. And, from there I started to make these teams. I started getting invited to try out for these teams, different types of AAA teams. And this is kind of one of the very first times I moved away from, well, not moved away, but we went to the summer hockey tournament in Winnipeg, and it's kind of when we went out somewhere else that was not, Mallard or Winnipeg. It was just kind of the surrounding areas where I lived and grew up. And, there was just something, when I went out there, it kind of got into a pretty chippy game. Hockey's pretty rough. And I was a rough kid, so I got into a shoving match with this girl in the corner of the rink. And, we get in shoving match, we're skating up the ice, and she called me a dirty Indian. She said, "Get off me, you dirty Indian." And this is the first time I've ever experienced this, so I didn't really know how to react. Like, I got sad, I cried because I'm a crier, and, I kind of got angry. I had all these mixed emotions, and I didn't really know what to do about it. And I remember just feeling like super defeated, and like I went to the bench, and my dad was one of the coaches, and luckily he was there. And he asked me what was wrong because he noticed that like I was kind of off, and I didn't even want to repeat it. He asked me what was wrong, and I didn't even want to repeat it. And I finally told him, and he told me something that's super important that stuck with me for till this day. And he told me to beat them on the ice, and basically beat them on the ice, meaning worry about yourself. Be so focused on your own success, so that when people say things like that to you, it doesn't even matter what they say because you're so focused on the end goal. And I was naturally just a very competitive person, so I loved to win, hated to lose. So that just drove me, and every single time that just like made me, I guess it just fueled me. And from that point on, I got called every name in the book. Got told to go back to my reserve, things like that. And but that just kind of like it just made me, just gave me more motivation, pretty much. So from there, I started to kind of separate myself from the pack a bit. Started getting invited to all these provincial teams and, try out for these high-performance teams. And this is kind of when I started to I guess I learned another valuable lesson about myself, is that you can't show up to camp out of shape. So the very first time I tried out for Team Manitoba, I ended up getting cut. And, I showed up to camp, thought I could, just come in and rely on my skill and be like, I'm okay, like I'll be fine, like, and just, try sauce it over everyone, from end to end, basically. Don't know what I was thinking, sorry. But so tried to, do that, didn't get away with it, ended up getting cut, getting told that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't gonna go represent Team Manitoba at Nationals, and they ended up winning a bronze medal. At the same time, my sister, growing up, my sister is a goalie, so we kind of tried out for the same team. She's a year older than me. She ended up making the team. And, she ended up putting all the work in. She always went for runs. She was always super fit, and, I was kind of the opposite, and I just relied on my skill. I thought I could do that. And, she ended up getting rewarded by going to, play for Team Manitoba at Nationals. And I remember when the day that she left, and I just kind of felt bummed out. Like, I was happy for her, but I was kind of bummed out because, like, we had played on every single team up until that point. And, I didn't like the feeling of being told no, I wasn't good enough. And I didn't like the feeling of just, like, missing out, basically. And, so from there, I basically, that's kind of when I decided, I was like, what, I don't want this to ever happen to me. So next year, I got another chance at it. So that entire hockey season, off-season hockey season, I basically did everything possible that I could to get myself, prepared for that. So next time when I try out, like, I'm gonna make this team. There was days where I'd spend, I'd be shooting hundreds of pucks, or I'd be, on the outdoor rink, and I'd be practicing different types of moves. I started going for runs. To this day, not a huge fan of running, to be honest with you, but I still do it, and I have to. So, I started, doing that, and, doing everything possible to just get super, like, fit and just, to last on the ice, basically. So, there was times where even, after practice, I'd stay on an extra 15, 20 minutes just to, work on different types of skills. Like, I'd get my dad to, there was one point where I got my dad to rim the puck to me. I'd go and pick it up with one hand and cross over, and just kind of working on my footwork and, going into shoot just to, get quick off the boards, basically. So so basically that was that. I got invited back to try out for Team Manitoba, ended up making it. And I dominated, I did really well. I ended up getting, from that point on, for another, like, the next 2 years, basically, I started to win all these top defenseman awards. I got invited to try out for Team Canada, the U18 team, and ended up making the team and just representing Canada in all these other events and winning all these top defenseman awards. And we won a gold medal when in Chicago with the U18s. I ended up getting like top 3 players of the top 3 players of Canada, and then I got top defenseman, and I finished second in points. I think I was on top of the world. So this is all because I ended up, decided to, put my mind, to what I wanted. to achieve my goal. So, I was on top of the world. This is U18s. Things couldn't, I was pretty pumped about that. But I just, wasn't satisfied with just that. My goal was always to get, a scholarship to the States, play hockey down there, and then play in the Olympics and play on the senior team. And, from there, I ended up accepting a scholarship to the University of Minnesota Duluth. So I played hockey down there, Division I hockey. And then, I did really well in my first 2 years, and I ended up getting invited to try out for the 2013-2014 team for the Olympics that year. So this was like the big time, like I always described it, because I mentor kids in my off time, so I always describe it like the team with Haley Wicihitowin on it. So I was pretty pumped about that. So I ended up, my sophomore year of college, I got this call. I remember exactly what I was doing. I was out for sushi with two of my best friends in the States. And I got the call, and I was like, why is this like random Toronto number calling me? And it was the head coach of the team. And it was the head coach of the team, and he's like, hey, Brigette, like, hope all is well. He's like, I just want to, invite you to be centralized for the 2013-2014 Olympics this year. And I didn't even know what that meant. I was just pumped that it was Dan Church calling me, and I was just like, I accept. I was just super pumped. And then, from that point, I ended up, going to boot camp, and it was probably one of the hardest, things that I've ever had to go through. I remember going through that 2013 boot camp, and it was kind of like the bring us together, kind of, working on our basically team bonding. And, there were long days. We'd wake up at, I think it was like 6 o'clock, and we'd go for a bike, like a 14-kilometer bike. We'd do a workout there, come back, and then our day would start with different types of training. That entire camp, it kind of was an eye-opener to me, because I didn't know what it took to be on that team. For an example, we had like this team bike that we had to do at the end of every week. So one was like a 110-kilometer bike to the nearest town and back through the mountains and all that stuff, that was fine. But then there was another one that was like up a kind of a dirt road, but it was, in total, I think it was like 87 kilometers or something like that. But which didn't seem that bad, but I was in a group with Haley Wicihitowin, and man, she could bike. And, there was one point where I was like, oh, I'm fine, like, I'm just gonna get this done, I'm gonna crank it out, like, I'm a decent biker, like, all this stuff. Meanwhile, like, I learned, like, 5 days ago how to, work my gears. So it's like, I'm just gonna crank it out, and I'm, like, super motivated. And she pulls us in, and it's kind of like a time thing. So there were 6 of us on the team that were kind of in a group, and Wick pulls us in, and she's like, all right, what? She's like, this is a team event, so we're gonna, obviously we're just gonna finish as a team, and it's not a race. And all the girls were just like, okay, because she's super competitive, and she's an amazing biker. And so we ended up starting, took off, and she just took off, and we were always trying to catch up, and I'm like struggling. And then there was a point where she was literally pushing my seat. She was biking on her own, and she was pushing my seat, making us, and we were passing groups, so we didn't have to go that fast. So we were like passing groups, and I was like, man, like this is wild. So I ended up finishing it, thank goodness. But that entire year, that was kind of an eye-opener to, because, I wasn't prepared. To be honest with you, I was, I learned that a lot about myself that year, because, I thought I could balance like my social life, and I thought I could balance like, different types of things and still like succeed and be the best in the world, and I couldn't do that. So from that point, being, actually seeing what it took from, players like Haley Wicihitowin and Carolyn Lacquette and Jana Hefford, and learning from that experience, it had helped shape me to be a better person. Obviously didn't make the team that year. I took it pretty hard, not gonna lie, just because I was so close to reaching my Olympic goal, and in not reaching it, it kind of made me re-guess, just rethink everything. I remember I took like 7 months off after I got cut, and I was kind of second guessing like going back to college and finishing there, and even trying for another 4 years, and took it really hard. But from that point, there was a point around just before I got invited back after the Olympics were done, kind of watched that, and then I just kind of reset, and I was like, okay, what, this is my goal. I set different goals for each year, And I was like, I want to make the world's team this year, and then I want to make it the next year, and kind of chip away towards that and start making these teams. So from there, I ended up, going back to college. I ended up, going back for my senior year of college. Did really well that year, and I went to all these camps and representing Canada in all these tournaments again. And everything started to fall into place for me. And I made Worlds. The senior team, the team with Haley Wickenheiser, though Carolyn Lacquette was the oldest person on the team that year. And went to Sweden, representing Canada there, and it was a pretty amazing experience to, although even though we lost 7-5 in the final, it was still a really great experience. And then we went to Kamloops the next year. So, things were, falling into place, which brings me back right before I found out again that I was going to be centralized. And again, same thing. I remember exactly where I was. I was in my parents' basement when I got the call for being centralized again, round 2. And I had to sit down. I remember they gave me a scheduled time where they were going to call. So I was just pacing around in the room. And again, I ended up getting the call. I sat down because I knew I was going to collapse either way, so I sat down just in case. And then the coach called me, and she asked me to be centralized again. And this is kind of where I made that choice to, what, I'm not going to, this is my second chance, and I'm not going to let this time, let it get away. So, I did everything I could to put myself in a position to be better. And again, we went to boot camp, same thing. It wasn't as bad as biking. We did different types of, running. We did a lot of different types of sports while we were at boot camp. A lot of us kind of got hurt in the first 5 days of running, so we all got sent to the swim team. So we all had to do swim laps in the pool. There was 10 of us there. So, but again, I wasn't a great swimmer. Megan Mickelson lapped me 3 times. So it was a great experience for everyone. It had a lot of fun. And then centralization happened. So then we came back. We played in the Midget AAA League out in Alberta, and then we played 6 games against the U.S. So we played everywhere. We played in San Jose, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Minneapolis, Boston, and Quebec City. And we ended up winning 5 of those 6 games. We played a tournament down in Tampa Bay last November, which is 4 nations. And, it was kind of like that entire year. It flew by, but it didn't at the same time. There was times where, I was super confident, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to make this team. I remember texting my parents and being like, guys, I think I'm going to make this team. I just had a really good game. I got 4 points last game. Things are looking great. And then the next game would be, I'd be a -3, and I'd cough up every puck, couldn't make a pass and things like that. So then I'd text my parents again and be like, I don't know. Just kidding. So then they'd be like, it's kind of just a roller coaster. And it took me a while to figure it out that, I had to actually focus on, myself and focus on what I brought to the team. And, we're not all the same type of player. So, we're pretty much apples and oranges, so everyone's different. So, from that point, I kind of, focused on my strengths and, which was my offensive ability, and I tried to, execute as best as possible. And, I remember, basically, the end of November, so we ended up going to this big tournament down in Tampa Bay, which is 4 nations. I ended up going there in November. And then from November, basically, till I found out that I made the team, it was kind of, I wasn't even sleeping, to be honest with you. It was kind of like you never really knew what the coaches were thinking, because they'd put you in the lineup, and they'd take you out, they'd put you in, and you had to see everyone. So we were just kind of didn't really know how to balance that. And I remember just being super nervous, all of December. I don't think I slept. And, I remember the day I found out that I made the Olympic team. We ended up getting back from a road trip in Edmonton that night. So we ended up getting home at 1:30, unpacking our bags, saying bye to everyone, good luck, whatever. And I remember getting home, and I stayed until 5 o'clock in the morning and just kind of just hanging out, because I didn't really know couldn't sleep, couldn't shut my brain off. And my roommate and / teammate was, also there, also couldn't shut her brain off. So I remember just sitting up talking till 5 o'clock in the morning. And so anyways, I ended up getting maybe a couple hours of sleep, waking up the next morning. I remember just walking around I just had this knot in my stomach walking around my house. And it's all right, fine, I'll make my way to the rink, super slow. I live 7 minutes from the rink, so I I stretched that out into like 15, doubled that time. So I was driving super slow. So I ended up making my way to the rink, got there 15 minutes before my meeting, and the way it was set up is that the rink would be here, we'd pull into like a little gated area, and we'd enter through one way, we'd meet with the coaches, and then the GM would walk us out a different exit, just so you don't cross past anyone. And I remember getting there, and I was like, I had a knot in my stomach, I was just sweating. I couldn't stop sweating. And I was just sitting there, and I was like, okay, I have like 15 minutes, I can just take my time, like whatever. And I remember just texting my parents and that morning, and all I said was, I don't know. And then it was like, that's all I said. And they knew what I was thinking, and they were like, no, you'll be fine, you're okay, like, you're good. Trying to like calm me down, but it wasn't working. And anyway, I got there, ended up getting into the rink, I was walking super slow, slowest I've ever walked in my entire life. Got there, end of the hallway, there was, the girl that was before me had her meeting already, so they're like 10 minutes early at the meeting. So she's at the end of the hallway, and she's super relaxed. She obviously made the team, and she had her coffee in her hand. She looks at me trying to get my attention, and she's like waving at me. And I kind of just look at her, and I was just like, and I just kept walking. I couldn't smile at her. I don't know why I couldn't smile that morning. So I ended up walking in, sitting in this little foyer area. So I was waiting for the coaches to come get me. And again, sitting there in silence, thinking of all the worst things. I'm like, why is it taking so long? Like, Joss has already done her meeting, and I'm just waiting here. Like, just, felt like hours were going by. It's been like 2 minutes. So I'm sitting there. One of my other teammates walks in, and her eyes are just puffy, and I kind of just look at her, and I'm like, and she's like, oh man, like I had to splash snow in my face because I was crying in the parking lot. And I was like, I felt so bad because it's like, it's so funny because like I looked like I was mad, and she was crying, and like it was just the way we handled our emotions that morning because it was super intense. And so we sat there, and we're like, we're okay, we're fine. And then we heard the coach come, and then we gave each other one of these fist bumps. And I ended up, the coach came and got me. He was super peppy, and he was like, walked in, he opened the door, and he's like, good morning, Brigette, and like smiling. And I was just like, looked at him, I was like, morning. He kept walking again, which is really rude, I'm sorry, but I just couldn't smile. And so anyways, we ended up getting into the room, and it was the 3 coaches, a table, and the GM, and there was an empty seat for me. And I walked in, and I sat down, and probably 5 seconds into sitting down, the coach stands up and says, congratulations, Brigette, on becoming an Olympian. Thanks. And that was one of the most relieving moments of my entire life, to be honest with you. And I remember exactly when she did that, all I did was this. I just put my head on the table, let out a big sigh, and then that's basically all I remember of that meeting. And then she just told me why she chose me and all these things like that. But, I was so relieved. And, to be told after all these years, it took me, 20 years to achieve this goal. I started hockey when I was 5 years old. And, it was a long road. And just to think back of all the times I wanted to give up. And, I didn't even believe that I was going to the Olympics until I was at the Olympics. I remember when I was walking in the opening ceremonies, they announced Canada. I was with all the other Canadian athletes. And they announced us, the place went wild, and that's kind of when it sunk in. We were walking around this like little circle area. And so we were walking in, and that's kind of when it hit me. It was like, wow, like, I'm here. Like, I'm an Olympian. And it's pretty wild. And just to think back of, in that moment, all my aunts and uncles and cousins were all watching, and they remember they were all sending me messages and taking pictures of me when I was on the TV. Like they had never seen me on the TV before, and they were just super pumped. And, it's just, it took an entire community, my entire family. It wasn't just my parents. Obviously, they did everything they could to get me there, but, it was my entire community. And, the leaders of my communities that have helped me get to where I am today. And, there was times when my parents couldn't drive me to practice, like my uncles would just like, okay, we'll take her, and then they'll take us to practice. So, one of the benefits of coming from a huge family, but, it's just, it took an entire community to get me to where I am today, and I'm super grateful for that. So, I usually always tell the kids that, the kids that I mentor, I always tell them that they can achieve anything that they set their mind to. And, it doesn't matter where you come from. I come from a tiny community of less than 100 people. So, everything's possible, just, never to give up. All right, I just want to say thank you guys for having me here today.